The 90s were a formative time, and I think it was 1994 when the decade really became what we think of as the 90s today. The Lion King topped the box office. Both Friends and The X-Files debuted in television. We had the death of Kurt Cobain, and Northern Ireland saw the end of hostilities between the UPF and the Provisional IRA. The Netscape internet browser was released, and we watched the series finale of Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was a strange kind of optimism, seeing as the world was going through a period of relative peace and prosperity, contrasted with rising suspicion and resentment towards our governments. The Cold War was over, and even Ireland, which was an extremely poor nation at the start of the decade, had come to be referred to as the Celtic Tiger. We had anti-establishment sentiment, conspiracy theories, back when it was the fun kind, the government's hiding aliens at Area 51, not today's QAnon fascist rhetoric. There was a lack of trust in the system as we come out of the Rodney King beating and the LA riots that followed. We'd had a taste of freedom, and it made us want more. It allowed us space to breathe and see the cracks we'd been stepping over just to get by. Into this landscape came a movie that forged a generation of goth culture. Born of loss, crafted in pain, and bookended by tragedy. It was awful and beautiful. Brutal, yet touching. Incomplete, but perfect. The ultimate 90s contradiction. The Crow. Welcome to the workshop. I'm Paul, aka Wordmaker. If Blade and The Matrix led the way for the action and superhero movies of the 21st century, it was The Crow that opened the door. Writer and comic artist James O'Barr began working on what would become the graphic novel The Crow in 1981 while stationed in Germany serving with the US Marines. His fiancée Beverly had been killed by a drunk driver a few years earlier, before he enlisted. O'Barr poured pain into his work, hoping it would have some therapeutic effect, although he would later reflect on how it ended up leaving him more troubled than before. Following a prelude comic published in Caliber Presents #1, January 1989, The Crow was released as a 4-part series from February to May of 1989, titled Pain, Fear, Irony, and Despair. It would later be collected into a graphic novel, which included a previously unpublished story from Caliber Presents, number 15, and a 5th issue of the comic, titled Death, which saw the conclusion of Eric's story. It wouldn't be long before O'Barr was approached by fellow writer John Shirley, who convinced him to work on adapting the comic into a screenplay. However, Shirley would later be fired after clashing with a studio executive, and David J. Scow was brought in for rewrites. Producer Jeff Most also did uncredited work on Shirley's drafts. Production began in February of 1993 in Wilmington, North Carolina, with Alex Proyas directing and Brandon Lee as Eric Drape. What they give us is a dark, beautiful movie swimming with religious and spiritual imagery. Our opening narration, given by Rochelle Davis, who plays Sarah, tells us that when we die, a crow will carry us to the afterlife, and that sometimes, if our death was unjust, if it inflicted so much pain that we can't rest, the crow could bring us back to put the wrong things right. Now, in my research for this video, I could find no counterpart to this in any real-world mythology or religion, but it feels like something we can believe in. There's no heavy lore, no exposition, just a soft voice as the camera flies over this hellish landscape. It's a folktale, a ghost story we once heard at a sleepover, something we're trusted to understand and connect with. In a similar fashion, characters in the movie, most notably Eric himself, often quote poetry and other works of literature. The words are impactful in and of themselves, but can add deeper meaning to a scene for any audience member who's familiar with them. In fact, it's one of these quotes that frames the story of the crow in a directly biblical light. A quote used to taunt to express fear and remorse, and that casts Eric and Shelley as a modern-day Adam and Eve. Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is. In my first video, I explained my 3 rules for critical analysis. I'll recap them here for anyone who hasn't watched that one, but please do check it out. This is a fledgling channel and we could use all the help we can get. Rule number 1. Nothing is ever just good or bad. This is not a review show and I'm not here to tell you whether or not a given movie is worth your time. Art is subjective, so the point of a critical analysis is not to change other people's opinions. The purpose here is to support a specific interpretation with evidence so that we can understand why the text makes us feel this way and improve our grasp of narrative structure and storytelling. Rule number 2. Every point we make must be backed up from the text. In this case, the text refers to the movie itself, which means no fan theories, no deleted scenes, no production notes. The original comic can act as a guide for what we could expect from the adaptation, but it's never a replacement for the movie as presented, or as a counterpoint to any argument being made. And lastly, Rule 3. There is a difference between our opinion of a narrative decision and understanding the impact it has on the story being told. Critical analysis deals with the latter. So I'm personally not fond of writers using rape and sexual assault as plot points, least of all as motivation for a man's revenge. But we must still interpret the movie in light of this. And despite my reservations, I still have a deep love for The Crow. Now let's get to work. The line I quoted before comes from Paradise Lost by John Milton. At a time when he too was suffering, he was mourning the loss of his second wife, Catherine Woodcock, and their infant daughter. This epic poem shows us the Garden of Eden, a place of peace, innocence, and happiness. Adam and Eve live a life that is both physical and spiritual. They're happy for their place in the world, simple as it is. And though they have a sexual relationship, it is one of sinless purity and love. Similarly, Eric and Shelley live together in a pleasant enough loft apartment. They're far from well off, and we've seen that the city and neighborhood they live in are rough places. Despite this, they live in domestic bliss. They laugh together, make love together, and plan a life together. Like Adam and Eve, their lives could be more, but they don't care. So long as they're together, they're happy. In Eric's flashbacks to the night of the murder, the gang leader T-Bird taunts Shelley while his goons assault her and trash the apartment. He specifically reads from a copy of Paradise Lost and derides it as pornography. Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is, and saw virtue in her shape how lovely. T-Bird mocks Shelley, spitting back the word virtue before slapping her to the floor. It's an act that suggests what he and his gang are about to do is an attempt to take away that virtue. It's as if they want it to be a retribution, not only for her complaints about the building's safety, but also for fighting back against the evictions in the property. They treat her as if she's responsible, as though her sin caused this, that it's her penance for viewing herself as being better than them. In Paradise Lost, Eve eats from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Therefore, her sin is simply to seek knowledge. She's punished for acting beyond her assigned function. Adam, seeing what Eve has been tricked to do by the serpent, eats the fruit as well, sacrificing himself. He commits a greater sin to share her fate, since he is fully aware of the consequences of his actions. But he cannot bear to be without Eve. Eric can't rest. He can't pass on and be with Shelley, so he returns to commit sin to ease his pain. After being pierced through the ribs by a knife, Eric is held Christ-like by Tintin and Skank, while T-Bird and Funboy shoot him. We will later see these wounds, closed but unhealed, like stigmata. He's thrown from the window, cast out of the paradise he and Shelley shared, and lands in the street. Blood stains his face, forming the shape of the decoration on a porcelain mask in their apartment. The opposing smile and tears Eric will wear when he begins his revenge. Adam and Eve, Eric and Shelley, unfairly cast out of paradise, only able to be together through, of all things, sin. What do we take from this? If Eric and Shelley's fates are a mirror to Adam and Eve, does this mean we're supposed to see what was done to them as righteous? Hardly. Milton is intentional in his framing of Eve's actions with moral uncertainty. Sure, she knew there would be consequences, but seeking knowledge is not an evil act, and certainly doesn't warrant such a brutal retaliation. We can see this reflected in The Crow, when the cops comment with surprise about Shelley fighting tenant eviction in such a bad part of town. So Milton's framing, I feel, can be compared to the all-too-common response of, what did she expect to happen when women report sexual assault? We're supposed to be of two minds about Eve's actions. Critics such as William Empson have noted Milton's complex depiction of Lucifer and argue that Paradise Lost is more morally ambiguous than a simple black and white narrative. In fact, in his 1965 work, Milton's God, Empson specifically praises Milton for trying to make God less wicked than as presented in Christianity, while acknowledging that, in order to be faithful to the story as presented in the Bible, God must still be cruel and unjust. Empson sees this contradiction not as a flaw in the poem, but a strength, a sign of Milton's skill and integrity. Indeed, Milton depicts Adam and Eve's relationship as relatively egalitarian for the time, where they depend on one another for their respective strengths, rather than Adam being Eve's superior. This fits with the interpretation that Milton saw marriage as an equal contract between men and women, something separate from the church. This very much suggests a more modern view of relationships, and while we only know that of the two, Eric is the one with a career, we also see him in domestic tasks like coming home with groceries. Meanwhile, it's Shelley who took the initiative to push back against the conditions of the building they're living in. There's even a touching memory where we see that Shelley may not be so skilled at the stereotypical wife chores like cooking. Paradise Lost presents God as a monarch and Lucifer as a rebel. Milton was well known for his anti-monarchist views, and critic John Leonard has interpreted Milton's War in Heaven as a civil war, noting Milton's praise for the uprising against and execution of Charles I in 1649. For an anti-monarchist to choose a subject matter where the story must inevitably side with a figure of monarchy suggests we're not supposed to choose our sides based on unilateral ideas of good and evil, but to see the complex shades of power, punishment, loss, and love. While the question of right or wrong is much more complex in The Crow, this means Top Dollar can be seen as both Satan and God. He controls the city and almost everyone in it, forcing people to resist him, then punishing them when they do. He must be overthrown. And since Paradise Lost has the Archangel Michael show Adam that the Son of God will one day rise to cast Satan down once and for all, this means Eric also has a dual nature. In confronting the city's dark master, he becomes both Satan the rebel and Christ the Redeemer in one. But we are meant to see Eric's revenge as righteous. There is no other way to view it following the terrible assault and murder of both he and Shelley. Their cat Gabriel even heralds that this is not really a quest for revenge, but a mission of divine retribution. One of the archangels, Milton casts Gabriel as the one who will sound his horn to signal the rise of the dead and the beginning of Judgment Day. It's when Eric touches Gabriel that he experiences the night of his and Shelley's murder all over, reliving their suffering before deciding to make them all pay. Interestingly, while Eric has taken inspiration and wisdom from literature, quoting Edgar Allan Poe, William Makepeace Thackeray, even his own songwriting, Top Dollar, or Big Bad, quotes only his father.
Dad gave me this. 5th birthday. He said, childhood's over the moment you know you're gonna die.
Somewhat appropriate for a figure who represents Lucifer. Eric's wisdom comes from within himself and his human experience, while Top Dollar's comes from dogma. It's a dark inversion of Eric, almost incestuous, having poisoned Top Dollar's worldview, turning him into an infection that is spread into every part of the city. He is sin, sinner, and the serpent, an unholy trinity. It isn't just Paradise Lost which lends its biblical tone to The Crow. If we consider historical Catholic doctrine, we can see that each of the villains Eric confronts reflects one of the 7 deadly sins.
Word came out while I was editing this video that actor Tony Todd had passed away at the age of 69. He was a wonderful actor with a stellar career, from Candyman to Final Destination to multiple roles in Star Trek. He elevated every scene he was in and was a talent who will be sorely missed. I wondered where to place this and decided this segment was the right place. You'll notice I don't mention his character, Grange. The reason is that even though he gives an always solid performance, and despite being the one to actually shoot the Crow, Eric never has a real face-to-face confrontation with Grange. So he exists partly on the peripheral, affected and affecting the story, but still distant from Eric. Perhaps he is Beelzebub or some other figure. In any case, Tony Todd will be fondly remembered.
Tintin is Wrath. He's the most directly dangerous of the gang, the only one to pose any physical challenge to Eric. He uses knives, taking his time to inflict pain, relishing in the experience of murder. Fittingly, Eric kills him with the same patience and attention he delivers to others. Gideon, the pawnshop owner, is clearly greed. His very existence is spent feeding off the spoils of the likes of Tintin, who bring him trophies from their kills. While Eric doesn't kill him, he does destroy his store and all his ill-gotten gains, literally using the rings Tintin sold him as ammunition. Funboy reflects gluttony, seemingly never sober, always drinking or injecting himself. Even when faced with his own death, the only thing he can muster is to weakly whimper that Eric is wasting his morphine. T-Bird represents Sloth, largely having his cronies inflict violence on his behalf. He is apathetic in his nihilism, burning his tongue with a cigar while drinking with his gang, and showing his sort of detached amusement when Eric carjacks him. He revels in watching destruction. He neither believes in nor cares for anything. His response to Tintin's death is purely businesslike. It means little to him on a personal level. His death is my favourite because of how utterly his worldview is shattered. It's not until he recognises who Eric is that his confidence breaks, and he realises that if Eric came back, that means there's somewhere to come back from. And he's afraid of what waits for him when he gets there.
But you ain't you. You can't be you. We put you through the window. There ain't no coming back. This is the really real world. There ain't no coming back.
Skank, the weakest and smallest of the gang, is Envy. He lacks everything the others have. He's not strong and fast like Tintin, nor does he get to enjoy earthly pleasures like Funboy or have the authority of T-Bird. In the drinking scene, he is the only one who doesn't get to drink. He watches his fellow thugs show off, increasingly impressed, and then turns to T-Bird with a pleading look when Tintin stops him and drinks in his place. In his death, he's cast aside, tossed through a window after Eric has dispatched the bulk of Top Dollar's gangland hierarchy. Micah, Top Dollar's lover and half-sister, represents lust. As a sin, lust is traditionally framed not as a love for sex, but the desire for sinful sexual acts such as rape and bestiality. Incest would certainly fall under this category. Appropriately, just as Jesus said in Matthew 5:29-30, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. The Crow, whose power she desires, plucks out her eyes, causing her to fall to her death. Lastly, Top Dollar is Pride. Like T-Bird, he doesn't particularly care about the deaths of these gang members. Instead, it's the challenge to his empire that offends him. He laments that Devil's Night, the pyromaniac tradition he started, has been commercialized and sanitized.
Do you know what they got now? Devil's Night greeting cards. Isn't that precious?
He orders his minions to do more damage, to hurt more people, to make even the gods fear them again. At the end, even after he's lost so much to Eric, he indulges his ego, telling Eric that he's made him happy, giving him a challenge to overcome. His pride is his undoing, as he lets his guard down, giving Eric the chance to show him what real pain is. Vengeance is inherently harmful. Those who seek it injure themselves, just as Eric must relive the pain of what he's lost and destroy the remnants of his life, releasing the things he loves. Eric's revenge will give him peace enough to rest and be with Shelley, but it won't do anything for the others who live in the city. Indeed, his revenge quest is what eventually puts Sarah's life in danger. But Eric, being inherently a good person, doesn't just seek mindless vengeance. He saves Sarah from being hit by a car and purges morphine from her mother, Darla, and sends her to care for her daughter instead of just leaving her with Funboy's body. In fact, the first time we see sunlight in the movie is following this, when Darla is seen making breakfast. This is our first hint that Eric has the power to do lasting good, to prevent future harm, rather than settle for punishing harm that cannot be undone. Sunlight and rain are powerful symbols. The rain represents Top Dollar's control over the city, rising to its height when he and Eric fight on the church roof. It only breaks partially when the sun shines in Darla's breakfast scene, and again when Eric reveals himself to Sarah. Love is what brings the sun back. In Paradise Lost, as Adam and Eve are cast out of Eden, Michael tells Adam that he and Eve may yet find a paradise within themselves, one even greater than the one they must leave. Eric and Shelley are reunited and can rest together forever. With Top Dollar defeated, the rain has finally, mercifully stopped. The sun is not yet shining. The rain has stopped. There is hope for the dawn to come. At 12:30 a.m. on March 31st, 1993, at EUE Screen Gems Studio in Wilmington, North Carolina, Brandon Lee was filming part of a scene where Eric Draven has walked in with Shelley being assaulted. The scene called for his character to be shot by Funboy as he walks into the room. Funboy's actor, Michael Massey, was using a .44 Magnum Smith & Wesson Model 629 revolver. It was the last scene of the day, and the production company sent the armourer home early. For a previous scene, filmed about 2 weeks earlier, the revolver had been fitted with makeshift dummy cartridges for a close-up. To save money due to budget constraints, the prop crew had made their own cartridges by removing the bullets from live rounds and getting rid of the powder charge before replacing the bullet. This meant the primer was still inside, unlike purpose-made dummy cartridges, which had neither powder charge nor primer. Witnesses would later report that they had seen an actor use the revolver while it was loaded with these cartridges. The prop assistant left in charge after the armourer left wasn't aware that all firearms had to be inspected before and after use. Michael Massey had no way to know that the previous unsupervised use of the revolver had resulted in the primer detonating, lodging a bullet in the barrel. For this scene, the revolver had been loaded with blank cartridges equipped with powder and primer, but no bullet. Without a bullet, there is no projectile, and this is relatively safe under most circumstances. When Massey pulled the trigger, the powder and primer went off, sending the lodged bullet into Lee. Lee was rushed to the New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Attempts to save him were unsuccessful, and after 6 hours of emergency surgery, Lee was pronounced dead at 1:03 p.m. He was 28 years old. The shooting was ruled an accident due to negligence.
On the death of Brandon Lee, James O'Barr reflected how the tragedy made him relive all the pain of losing his fiancée. He expressed his anger at God for taking away someone who had become a dear friend. O'Barr has said that Brandon and his own fiancée, Eliza Hutton, helped him find ways to bring some good out of his loss. He's gone on to put almost all the money he's earned from the comic and movie towards charitable work.
In an interview just prior to his death, Brandon Lee quoted a passage from Paul Bell's book, The Sheltering Sky, which he had chosen for his wedding invitations. It is now inscribed on his tombstone. Because we don't know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. And yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? An afternoon that is so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 times more. Perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. Yet it all seems limitless. Thank you for watching. The Crow holds a special place in my heart, hitting me at the peak of my angsty teen phase, and returning to me many times since then. Eric Draven was a Halloween costume more than once, back when I still had all my hair. I haven't seen the remake, and I have no particular desire to. the original movie was something special and maybe wouldn't have had such an impact without the tragedy of Brandon Lee's death. Who can know? What about you? Do you have any takes on The Crow? Were there any other gothy 90s movies that resonated with you? If you like this, please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to help me do more of this, head over to patreon.com/wordmaker where you can support the channel, or just drop me a comment with your feelings. Remember to back up your arguments, cite your sources, take care, and I'll see you next time.